Once one of the most famous named trains in the UK, the Brighton Belle combined the latest in electric traction with the cream of Pullman luxury, travelling the 53-mile run between London Victoria and Brighton with a perfect mixture of speed and comfort that would last for nearly 40 years, before being inauspiciously brought to an end in the early 1970s as British Rail sought rationalisation of its expenses amid falling traffic. By the 1930s, Brighton possessed a curious mix of residents, ranging from its traditional upmarket populace to a new breed of commuters who had made a home in what was dubbed London by the Sea. While tourist traffic increased passenger numbers tenfold during the summer, though the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway did not relish the prospect of being known solely for the carriage of third-class excursionists between London and Brighton. However, the provision of a Pullman service meant that it could keep its prosperous customers, and following an inaugural run on December 5, 1881, a dedicated luxury train from London to Brighton, known as the Brighton Pullman, was developed, which offered the latest innovations in rail travel that, for a supplementary fare, was far beyond the regular first-class offerings, including a stove which made foot warmers unnecessary, toilet and wash basin facilities, and tea and freshly prepared sandwiches all delivered by uniformed staff and attendants. Pullman services continued on the Brighton route with occasional variations until changes in stock, with 1888 seeing the 3 dedicated Pullman cars be joined by 2 matching 6-wheeled railway vans known as Pullman Pups, one housing a dynamo providing power for lighting, that was also shared with boat train services to the Channel ports, while the Brighton Pullman service was officially known as the Pullman Limited Express and the Pullman Limited, and comprised a non-stop service. On October 2, 1898, a new Pullman service was introduced for the Brighton line known as the Brighton Limited, although it had to wait until 1899 to appear in official timetables and accompanying market literature, with the Sunday-only service, which ran from October to June, together with the daily unnamed Pullman service becoming so popular that further changes were on the horizon. In 1906, the first of 3 new 35-ton wood-panelled Pullman coaches appeared on the route, and were painted for the first time in the umber or white and chocolate brown livery, which was to later be adopted as the standard colour scheme by the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, while 2 years later, in 1908, the British Pullman Palace Car Company was purchased by Sir Davison Dalziel, later Lord Dalziel of Wooler, to be operated as his own private company, and he would finance the purchase of new rolling stock through another of his companies, the Drawing Room Car Company. This would result in the Southern Belle, which ran for the first time in November 1908, and comprised a 7-car train operating 7 days per week all year round, and billed as the most luxurious train in the world, while from 1910, the frequency of journeys was increased to twice daily on Monday to Friday services, and was also the first Pullman train to be built in England, with the coaches being double-bogie 12-wheelers with elliptical rather than clear-story roofs, internal mahogany panelling, fine soft-coloured carpeting, damask silk blinds, and settees in green Morocco. Following World War I, March 1919 would see the Southern Belle resumed as a Sunday service, and while Pullman services were suspended during the coal strike of spring 1921, by July 1924 the former London, Brighton and South Coast Railway had been absorbed into the wider Southern Railway, as reflected in a broader and more inclusive service that comprised a first-class Sunday-only service and first- and third-class services at all other times. The Southern Belle remained a steam-hauled service until line electrification with a third rail system, as completed over a 4-year period in 1933, with the Southern Electric, as the system was dubbed, having evolved under the direction of Sir Herbert Walker, the general manager of the Southern Railway, with his board's business strategy being to electrify suburban lines as a continuation of an original incentive that had begun prior to World War I. Originally, overhead wires had been utilised, but on a widespread scale, the Southern would adopt the third rail option as a more convenient and less expensive solution to push electrification to the coast, though in spite of the potential replacement of steam with electrics on the service to Brighton, the company sought to evolve the Southern Belle to match this new form of propulsion. In response to the opportunity of the electrified line, Lord Dalziel ordered a complete new set of Pullmans, which were built by the Metro Camel Carriage and Wagon Company of Birmingham, with the front of the third-class motor parlour brake cars resembling other stock employed elsewhere on Southern's electrified lines, though they lacked nose-mounted corridors, while also being the heaviest coaches used in Britain at the time, weighing in at 62 tons. These trains were finished in Pullman's corporate umber and chocolate brown, and bore the Pullman badge below the driver's windows, while the parlour brakes contained 4 large electric motors, each sufficient to power the heavy train and a full complement of passengers, though sufficient space to incorporate luggage compartments still existed due to the contemporary use of heavy trunks and suitcases. Lord Dalziel's company also anticipated greater use of the Brighton Belle electrified service, and thus the third parlour and motorised brake parlours were built with slightly cramped 2+2 seating, in contrast to the 2+1 on other steam-hauled Pullman trains, with the Southern Belle being superseded by the Brighton Belle when steam-hauled Pullman services to Brighton were replaced in June 1934. The Brighton Belle was the world's first regular Pullman all-electric service, although the first accolade might have gone to the Golden Mountain Pullman Express of the Montreux Oberland Bernois Railway, or MOB, a short-lived service which began in 1931 and lasted for only one season, while by contrast, the Brighton Belle immediately became the country's premier electric train service and at once the most famous electric multiple unit in the world. The 5 Belle, under its official Southern Railway designation, was officially named by Margaret Hardy, the Brighton mayor, on June 29, 1934, and though the 3 sets of 5 cars were known simply as the Belle, they were characterised by plush decor, deep armchairs and pink lampshades, and for providing a regular and timely non-stop service to the South Coast in style. Stylistically, the Brighton Belle was different to the vintage Pullman carriages first introduced to its other mainline prestige competitor, the Golden Arrow, and introduced a new lexicon for train travel in the form of art deco and jazz modern, as these adjectives describe the new Pullman train surroundings, while the route to Brighton meant that the Belle was also a mainline seaside special, running as the ultimate party train, providing service for late risers and promoted for party outings and evenings by the sea. The Brighton Belle, with its initial 3-trip Monday to Saturday and 2-trip Sunday scheduled services, became the jewel of the Southern's crown, and in later years the frequency of trips increased to 6 and 4 respectively, and once the service became housed in Brighton, 2 additional trips were built into the timetable, making 8 Monday to Saturday journeys each way, the service being renowned for its punctuality as a 60-minute non-stop service. The Belle also became extremely popular with Brighton-based theatricals, as they could rely on its timings to get them to and from work in London, and in the days before celebrity culture, the Belle was a train to be seen on, being referred to as an autograph album on wheels by the Daily Telegraph. The train's longevity would be owed somewhat to the outbreak of World War II, with 1939 seeing the Brighton Belle, in common with all other titled trains, have their title and destination roof boards removed, while Unit 3052 was damaged by bombing at Victoria Station on October 9, 1940, and taken out of service, though after a first short withdrawal for the national emergency, the Brighton Belle began running again, albeit with rationed food and customers, as well as staff who had been up all night on duty in the Home Guard. Subsequent bombing made it necessary to withdraw all Pullman cars in May 1942 and hide them away in unlikely places for their own protection, with the Brighton Belle service being eventually reinstated following repair to Unit 3052 on October 6, 1947. The Brighton Belle entered into the nationalised British Railways operation the following year and began a long period of almost uninterrupted and relatively quiet service, with the wartime break and less intensive use of the stock, consisting of only 3 sets of units, allowing one of the units to provide a Sunday-only eastbourne Pullman service until 1957. However, by the early 1960s, the Belle was beginning to show its age, and in 1967, the Pullman division had passed into British Rail's hands, with the process of corporatisation promptly beginning, with the 3 sets of 5-car Pullman units being refurbished and repainted into the standardised BR blue and grey livery, which was considered highly unpopular by enthusiasts and those who cherished the prestige of the train. The Pullman cars lost their names and numbers, while the name Brighton Belle was painted on the lower fascia of the cars, with BR's logo replacing the Pullman badge, this being the last stage of life for the Brighton Belle, as the service was gradually wound down, though this would become a cause célèbre when in 1969 Lord Olivier found he could no longer receive grilled kippers for breakfast, after which they were reinstated following an outcry in the national press. However, closure of the Pullman service was inevitable, and despite strong protest to keep the train running, even from celebrity travellers, nothing could postpone the eventual demise of the luxury train, with the Brighton Belle being ultimately withdrawn on April 30, 1972, 6 months ahead of the Golden Arrow, and only 1 year ahead of the diesel-powered Western and South Wales Pullmans on the Great Western, this being emblematic of BR's gradual retreat from the Pullman train industry that would be completed with the removal of the Yorkshire Pullman and the Hull Pullman in May 1978, leaving only the Manchester Pullman to continue into the 1980s. Regardless of it being considered that something of profound importance had been sacrificed on the altar of austerity, the service was officially suspended the following day on May 1, 1972, with the last runs of the Brighton Belle including the sell-out cheese and wine and champagne specials, with the public reasons given by BR to justify its closure being a replacement set of similar quality and provision being too expensive to justify. However, despite the Brighton Belle signalling the end of 90 years of constant Pullman operation between London and Brighton, all 15 Pullman cars would be sold to a variety of purchasers, with none being scrapped by British Rail itself, though one of the third-class cars, Car 90, was partially destroyed by fire in 1990 and subsequently vandalised beyond repair. One car survives in permanent hospitality use, though coaches 281 Gwen, 284 Vera, and 280 Audrey were restored to their former glories and now operate as part of the Venice Simplon Orient Express British Pullman, while VSOA parent company, Belmond, also owns Car 283 Mona, Car 86, Car 92, and Car 93, which are all in storage awaiting full restoration in due course. The other cars are owned by the 5 Bell Trust charity, which has raised in excess of £5 million to bring back 6 of the original Brighton Belle cars, numbers 279 Hazel, 282 Doris, Car 85, Car 87, Car 88 and Car 91 to mainline operational condition, with new bogies being introduced to reduce the notorious rough riding of the coaches, while expectations are for test runs to be conducted on the Merseyrail network during 2025, prior to a full charter reintroduction. In the end, the Brighton Belle proved to be another unique quirk of the British Railway network, combining the latest technology of its time with the art-deco luxury of the Pullman service to create an icon of the Big Four era, and one that would stand the test of time by continuing not only into the 1970s, but also being prepared for a future revival into regular charter service, bringing the classic Pullman experience back to the third rail network.